What is going on, everybody? Hope everybody's enjoying their day so far. We are back with another fantasy football live show talking about our week 8 starts and sits. I'm also be going through our week 7 recap, just going through some news and key injuries heading into the new week of this NFL season. Then we will also get into how our team did in week number 7 and what happened in the waiver wire. And we also need to set our lineups because we do have a lot of bye weeks as you need to keep track of as well heading into this week. So we're going to talk everything about what's going to be happening in week number 8 and what has happened in week number 7 of players who are rising and players who are falling as well. So as always, we start off the show here with our studs and duds heading into week number 7. As I always want to remind you at the start of the show, if you have any questions pertaining to starts and sits heading into this week or any trade questions, because I know we're just about over a month away from the trade deadline. That's how it's done in ESPN leagues. I'm sure you also have your trade deadlines in your Yahoo leagues, your sleeper leagues. So just keep that in mind when asking your trade questions. So hopefully you got a win. Hopefully you continue to build on this winning streak, or if you're on a losing streak like myself in one of my leagues, looking to dig out of that hole. So let's go ahead and knock out our studs and duds, and then we will get into some injury news heading into week number 8, and then we will get right into our fantasy starts and sits. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start off with our quarterback stud of week number 7, and that's going to be Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. Now, if you told me if what happened after 3 quarters, Bo Nix probably would have been our dud of the week. But Bo Nix and the Broncos put up an epic comeback, putting up 33 points in the fourth quarter, beating the Giants 33-32. And Bo Nix definitely had his best fantasy outing of the season, 279 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. And he also had 5 rushing attempts, 48 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. That's what we saw in some of the games from rookie season of Bo Nix. So good enough for 39.96 fantasy points. So if you're lucky enough to start Bo Nix, hopefully you end up winning your matchup this week in week number 7. But Bo Nix, we're definitely going to be talking about him because he has a nice matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. And we know what the Cowboys defense allows against both receivers and quarterbacks. So I definitely think that Bo Nix over these next couple of games could really get going here. These are now we had him last week as our dud of the week because it was only 5 points. This week it was 39 points in that epic game against the New York Giants on Sunday afternoon. So Bo Nix earns our quarterback stud. Honorable mention goes to Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco and even Aaron Rodgers too. They had a duel on Thursday night. So those were 2 streamable options. Joe Flacco, if you missed it, was one of my top waiver wire quarterback ads. Obviously, Jackson Dart is one of those as well if he is available. But I went to that, that Jackson Dart more than likely in most of the leagues that you play in is not going to be available. But Bo Nix is our quarterback stud. Now, this is a pretty vanilla pick, but we definitely need to talk about Christian McCaffrey's season so far. I know in the one league that I'm playing in, one of my league mates has Christian McCaffrey and both Jonathan Taylor. It feels like every league that you have that combo, you are sitting pretty good. But Christian McCaffrey is now the number 1 fantasy running back according to ESPN. So from the 49ers, 24 attempts, 129 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He also is one of the top receivers. I looked up today. It was like you had Jackson Smith and Jigba as number 1, and Christian McCaffrey's number 8. He had 7 receptions, 72 yards. In a defensive game against the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday night, good enough, though, for 40.1 fantasy points. So it's really not even a question that you're starting Christian McCaffrey every single week. No matter the matchup, it could be the toughest matchup of the week, and he still can put up at least 20 fantasy points. And this was one of those outings that Christian McCaffrey, could definitely put up, gets you a couple of rushing touchdowns, and gives you that receiving volume, especially with all the receiving depth, woes, and injuries that the 49ers have. And Mac Jones, it could be Brock Purdy. It doesn't really matter because Christian McCaffrey is going to provide you that elite both rushing upside and receiving upside that we're looking for with our fantasy football teams. So Christian McCaffrey, I know it's a pretty generic pick, but he is our RB stud of week 7. Wide receiver stud's going to be Devontae Smith. We finally get Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver after the recent struggles of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, but you had A.J. Brown with that touchdown. A.J. Brown, is along with Devontae Smith, had themselves a nice game against the Minnesota Vikings, a game which felt like was really controlled by the Eagles pretty much the majority of that game. But Smith had 9 receptions, 183 yards, and 1 touchdown. So this is the numbers that he was putting at in his Heisman season with Alabama. And, he definitely has that potential every single week to put up these numbers. I mean, it's one of the more high-powered offenses. I know it's not one of the more elite passing offenses like we see from Tampa in Detroit. But 34.3 fantasy points, we will take that every single day from Devontae Smith. I know there was a ton of wide receivers. Jamar Chase had a blow-up on Thursday night. And then you also had Amon-Ra get another 20-point fantasy outing. You saw Cortland Sutton get back on track. So there's a lot of receivers really get back on track. You saw CeeDee Lamb get that 73-yard receiving touchdown as return with Dallas. But Devontae Smith will earn our wide receiver stud of the week. We're going to, speak of the Dallas Cowboys, we're going to go to the Cowboys tight end and the number 1 tight end in fantasy so far this season in PPR formats. That is Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. I know the stat line isn't all too crazy. 7 receptions and 29 yards won't necessarily get you there to those 21.9 fantasy points in PPR formats. However, in PPR formats, you get 7 receptions. That gets you automatically 7 points. And then those 2 passing touchdowns get you there to those 21.9 fantasy points. So I know the 29 yards isn't all that exciting, but the volume is still there. And the question marks that we had with Jake Ferguson was, is he going to be able to do this with a healthy receiving core, both George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb there? We saw it. He was able to do it even with all those guys back. So Jake Ferguson is a must-start option moving forward no matter the matchup. This Cowboys offense is definitely starting to play well, and this is a Cowboys team that's also starting to play well too. The defense was able to shut down. I know Jane Daniels played a majority of that first half, then he get injured. Then he saw Marcus Mariota, and after that, it was all Cowboys as they ended up winning that game 44-22. But Jake Ferguson earns our studs. So that is our studs of the week, and now we will get on to our duds of the week. And first up, we're going to go Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams last week, if you tuned into the show, was one of my starts of the week. Didn't really pan out, 172 passing yards. He didn't really have nothing in the rushing game, and he did throw an interception in this game in what I thought was going to be a runaway for the Bears. And then we thought that Roma Dunze was going to do well, Caleb Williams. But it was really most of the running backs. You saw DeAndre Swift and even Kyle Monangai, who was one of my favorite fantasy waiver wire ads of this week. But Caleb Williams, only 5.68 fantasy points. And if you're to start him, definitely a dud performance from a guy who's definitely been consistent. But we will see if Caleb Williams can bounce back in a nice matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, which is another bottom defense. We thought that they're Saints, in their passing game, but it was just a game that the Bears were able to run the football quite well. They had over 200 rushing yards. So Caleb Williams is a dud. Is he a dud the rest of the season? No. This is not a panic. I think that Caleb Williams will bounce back in a nice matchup against Baltimore. So, if you could trade, if you could buy low for Caleb Williams, this is one of my favorite candidates moving forward, especially if you're weak at quarterback. He definitely has some nice matchups moving forward because Caleb Williams and the Bears already had their bye week. You're going to have a lot of these teams, have these mid bye weeks, and you'll have some late bye weeks, especially near those fantasy football playoffs. So if you're looking for a quarterback to buy low, maybe Caleb Williams will be the guy for that. So let's pause for this. We do have a question coming through here. Do I trade Puka Nacua for A-Chain? I have no running backs. If you definitely need some running back help, I would definitely do that. I know Devon A-Chain isn't on that great of an offense, but if you're desperate at running backs and if you're under 500, I would definitely pull the trigger on that. Puka Nacua, more than likely, you won't see him till after the Rams bye week, so you're going to have to just eat it this week. But if you desperately need a running back, I would definitely do this. And even if you get, a better running back to this than Devon A-Chain, I would definitely pull that as well. But yes, if you are desperate at a running back, I would do this. Okay, let's go on to our running back dud of the week. And that's going to be Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt of the Washington Commanders. Only 13 attempts, 33 yards. It was just a tough game script for the Commanders. They were down pretty much the majority of this game. Their defense, This Commanders defense has really been struggling for the early weeks of this season. Only 4.2 fantasy points. And JCM, I mean, when you saw that Austin Eckler go down with an injury, we thought that JCM was really going to be that bell cow guy for the Commanders, and it just really hasn't panned out for him. So JCM is our dud of the week. We'll have another question here. My other wide receivers are CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, and Quinn Johnson. My RBs are Dobbins, JCM. I think I would definitely feel fine with having CeeDee Lamb go as your wide receiver 1. DK Metcalf is a fine wide receiver 2 option. And the way that Quinn Johnson has been operating in this offense, I know it's going to be like week by week, like who's going to have that big game? Will it be QJ? Will it be Keenan Allen, or will it be Ladd McConkey? I think, trading away Puka Nacua, because your running backs right now aren't great with having Dobbins in JCM. So definitely go with that trade. I know upside-wise, Puka has some more long-term, but if you need fantasy points now, I would definitely make that trade and go for Devon Achane. Even in a bad offense as he is, Achane has been one of the more bright spots in that Miami offense. We will continue on with our wide receiver duds. Speaking of the Miami offense, let's go ahead and talk about Jalen Waddle. He is our wide receiver dud. And it was just an awful game from Tua. I mean, he was benched for Quinn Ewers. We will see if Mike McDaniel goes another way, because he talked about in his post-game press conference that it might be a change going from Tua to Quinn Ewers. So we will see who will be the starting quarterback for Miami's matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. But 1 reception, 15 yards. It has been a consistent outing for Jalen Waddle for the past couple of weeks. Only 2.5 fantasy points. So to be honest with you, this is a guy that I would probably sell for whatever I get at this point. It's just a terrible offense. I just don't want anything to do with it moving forward. So if you can move Jalen Waddle for like a middle-of-the-road running back or the middle-of-the-road wide receiver, I would definitely do that as well, because I just don't know how this offense is going to be, especially if Tua is still the starting quarterback. If Quinn Ewers, sure, but Jalen Waddle is our wide receiver dud for the week. Now let's go on to our tight end dud, a guy that we were desperately waiting to return to the San Francisco 49ers. It was George Kittle of the 49ers. And yes, that is not a typo. He had 0 receptions, 0 yards. He was targeted a couple of times, 0 fantasy points. I wouldn't panic at all this. He is definitely coming back from a gruesome injury that he suffered back in week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks. The last time that we saw Kittle on the field, it was 12.5 fantasy points, a touchdown on the first drive for the 49ers. But I think that he's going to be okay. He has another tough matchup against the Houston Texans defense that has been pretty solid against tight ends, but I would still start George Kittle every single week. I think that this was an outlier look for George Kittle. I think it's going to take him just a couple of weeks, knock off that rust, and you'll see the George Kittle that we saw early on in the season. So that is our studs and duds of week number 7. Now let's go on to our news and injuries. Heading into week number 8, not as many injuries, or we had like a lot of players returning from the injury reserve. Like I mentioned, we had CeeDee Lamb return, a blow-up game for him. Rashee Rice returning for him for his suspension. He got 2 touchdowns in that game. So look for Rashee Rice to continue to dominate in this Chiefs offense. And the way that Patrick Mahomes has been playing, definitely start him every single week moving forward. But the top injury of the week is Mike Evans. Mike Evans today reported here was placed on the injured reserve. So we got that report after the game that he was more than likely going to miss most of the season, if not all the season. So if you're without Mike Evans, looking at the Tampa Bay wide receiver room moving forward, Emeka Egbuka now is going to slide into that wide receiver 1. I do think that the rookie out of Oregon, Tez Johnson, has really been playing well. Look for him to go to that wide receiver 2 role. You will see Sterling Shepard get involved, as well as the tight end, Kate Otten. We already got the report that Godwin and Bucky Irving is still out. So Rachaad White is still going to be that bell cow running back. And with Chris Godwin out, I would definitely trust Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson the most at the wide receiver spot for this week against the Saints. And then Kate Otten would definitely be a fine play as your tight end moving forward. Next news that we need to get to is Jayden Daniels. Today is out versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So if you have Jayden Daniels as a fantasy owner looking for some streaming quarterbacks, I mentioned at the top Joe Flacco will be a fine option. If Jackson Dart is available, definitely go pick him up. He has a nice matchup this week as well against the Philadelphia Eagles. So Marcus Mariota will start. So, we've seen Marcus Mariota in some small sample size games early in the season, and they played fine. But We'll see. Deebo Samuel more likely is going to be playing in this one. Jerry McLaurin's been dealing with an injury. So I just don't really feel too confident in starting any Washington Commanders. But obviously, if you do have Deebo, that would definitely be pretty much the only play. But if Terry does play, I would play him as well. But really, outside of that, there's really no really players that I'm jumping to start for the Commanders this week. Didn't really have too many injury news outside of that. We saw Brandon Graham return to the Philadelphia Eagles, so that's definitely going to be a nice boost for the Philadelphia Eagles defense. So if you have the Eagles defensive fantasy football, that's definitely some exciting news moving forward. We did have some news out of New Orleans that Chris Olave and the New Orleans Saints have clear communication despite the trade rumors. I honestly think if you are a Chris Olave fantasy owner, you want Chris Olave to stay in New Orleans because the volume is definitely through the roof with both Spencer Rattler and Chris Olave, and not too many wide receivers to get involved. No Rashid Shaheed. He's like a boomer bust option in fantasy football, and then the tight end spot. It's just like what you're going to get with Taysom Hill, Juwan Johnson. And with Kendre Miller being out with a torn ACL, you have Eric McCoy being out for the season. Alvin Kamara is now going to really be the bell cow running back, which he really always was this season. But you're going to see the rookie of Kansas, Devin Neal, start to get some more touches there. So in deeper leagues, I would definitely go pick up Devin Neal if we do see an injury to Alvin Kamara. In other type of formats, that would be nice. But really outside of that, that would only be the option there. So really just scrolling through some of like the injury news, not really seeing too much. We did get some news that Hassan Haskins is going to be out for tomorrow night's game for the Chargers. So if you do have Kamani Vidal, it is a tough matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. We literally just saw the Chargers and Justin Herbert throw for over 400 passing yards. So this is more of a passing offense, but I would still start Kamani Vidal against the Vikings. So that is pretty much all the news in the injuries heading into this. We did get the report that Lamar Jackson was in practice today. We will see if he plays in Baltimore's matchup against the Chicago Bears. Jets quarterback Tyrod Taylor, who had a chance to start Sunday versus the Bengals, is now considered day-to-day with a knee injury. To be honest with you, if the only Jet that we're really debating on starting is Breece Hall, Gary Wilson is going to be out with an injury this week. And if we have no Tyrod Taylor, then we might be looking at Justin Fields getting the start for. And then we have Carson Wentz will start Thursday night. He was dealing with an injury, but that is going to be a tough matchup for Wentz and the Vikings against the Chargers. I think that's pretty much all the injuries in the news that we have to get into. I didn't really see too many trade rumors this week as we have seen in the past, but just keep that in mind. The trade deadline for the NFL is going to be the first week of November. So just keep that in mind as well in the fantasy football landscape. That is all the news and injuries heading into week number 8. So we're going to keep it here on week number 8 as we now dive into our week 8 fantasy football starts and sits. As we always do here for the sits, we're going to give you 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. And for the sits, we'll give you 1 of each position. So let's move on to our week 8 fantasy football start, starting with the quarterbacks. And the first one we're going to get into was our stud of week number 7. That's going to be Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. Another nice matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. We had Bo Nix as an honorable mention as the start of the week. Last week going up against the New York Giants. The Dallas Cowboys have allowed 17-plus points to 7 quarterbacks so far this season. It could have been 8 if it wasn't for the Jaden Daniels injury. But Dallas's defense really played well in the second half, but that was Marcus Mariota. I do expect Bo Nix. I don't know if he's going to put up 40 points again, but I definitely think he can get to that week 8 projected total points of 20.2. His projected passing yards at 239.7, and his projected passing touchdowns at 1.8. Could be a high-scoring shootout the way that the Denver Broncos offense has been playing the past couple of weeks. I know they had that dud game in London against the New York Jets, and the Cowboys offense has really been phenomenal the past couple of weeks. So I am starting Bo Nix, especially in one of my personal leagues. So if you do have Bo Nix rostered, I would definitely start him in what would be a really nice matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Now let's move on to our next quarterback, and this quarterback has really been cooking for the Indianapolis Colts, who now sit with only 1 loss on the season, being to the LA Rams. Another nice matchup going up against the Tennessee Titans, who have allowed 23.1 fantasy points to Drake May last week. And Drake May has been a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Daniel Jones in this offense has really been playing some complimentary football, both with Jonathan Taylor being one of the best running backs in all fantasy football this season. And if you have seen, the likes of Michael Pittman and Tyler Warren really step up with Josh Downs being out last week, we will see if Josh Downs will play in this matchup against the Titans. But looking at his projected total points at 19.5, could definitely see that. Wouldn't be shocked if we do see a rushing touchdown, but I think more of the volume will come through the pass, as the Titans secondary has really been vulnerable against opposing quarterbacks. And looking at his passing yards at 236.8, passing touchdowns at 1.6, I think that this could be a very fine day for Daniel Jones. So if you do have him on your roster, start him. If if he is on the waiver wire, definitely go ahead and pick him up if you haven't already, because it is going to be a solid matchup against the Titans defense that has really been gettable against opposing quarterbacks. Now let's move on to the running backs. We're going to go to Chicago for this one in DeAndre Swift. You are starting to see Kyle Monangai get involved, but I'm really not too worried because DeAndre Swift is still the bell cow running back in this one. Another really nice matchup going up against the Baltimore Ravens defense that have struggled both in the past and the rushing department. And this is a Ravens defense that has given up double digits to 9 running backs so far this season. So look for DeAndre Swift, who has really been one of the most consistent fantasy football running backs this season. So go ahead and plug him in and play him. Definitely thinking that he could find the end zone. It was, a really nice rushing game for the Bears against the Saints. And the Ravens, the way that they have been injured, this is a team coming off of the bye week. So we will see if they do get some of these key guys on defense to return. But nonetheless, DeAndre Swift is a fine play this week for week 8. Rachaad White will be our next running back that we're starting for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it was a tough matchup for the Bucs against the Lions. You got to give credit to the Lions defense and Kelvin Shepard. His first year being the defensive coordinator in Detroit, he really had a nice game plan against a high-powered offense and the Bucs. Look for this whole entire Bucs offense to really respond against the New Orleans Saints defense that's both gettable in the rush and the pass. I know you could look last week with both Rome Odunze's stats and DJ Moore that the Saints did well against the pass, but to be honest with you, I think that was just an outlier. Look for the Buccaneers to run away with this one, as the Saints offense, it won't be able to keep up with the Buccaneers. But the Saints overall this season has allowed 7 running backs to score 14-plus points. So I think that Rachaad White with no Bucky Irving, with no Mike Evans, you could see more receiving go to Rachaad White. But I would definitely bet Rachaad White to find the end zone this week. Could have a lot of big plays in the rushing department. So I'd also start Rachaad White along with DeAndre Swift this week. Now let's go on to the pass catchers. We're going to keep it in Denver with Courtland Sutton. And after, it feels like Courtland Sutton gives us the dud, then he has a solid game, then he has a blow-up game. So we will see if that trend continues, as like I mentioned with Bo Nix. A nice matchup going up against the Dallas Cowboys. So far this season has allowed 15-plus points to 7 wide receivers. So the Cowboys secondary has definitely been gettable, whether you're a quarterback or a wide receiver like Courtland Sutton. And really looking at the other wide receivers, I know that Troy Franklin had that touchdown, but really outside of that, Courtland Sutton has really been the alpha wide receiver 1 here in Denver. And you've seen, J.K. Dobbins is more of that rushing upside, while R.J. Harvey, has been more of that receiving backup. But I expect Courtland Sutton to really have a nice game. Looking at his projected total points at 14.7. Wouldn't be shocked at all if he's one of the wide receivers this week to get over 20-plus points, especially with the matchup this week. Receiving yards is at 67. Receiving touchdowns at 0.5. So all it really needs is to have those over 67 receiving yards and to give you a touchdown to really have a nice day. I think that could definitely be in store and what could be, like I mentioned, a high-scoring game against the Dallas Cowboys. The next wide receiver we're going to talk about for our starts of the week is DK Metcalf of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know he didn't have that great of a game against the Cincinnati Bengals and what we thought was going to be a solid performance for DK Metcalf. Look for him to bounce back against the Green Bay Packers, who have allowed the 7 most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers. And the Packers as another defense against opposing wide receivers. And DK Metcalf has really been only the viable wide receiver option. I mean, I know that we saw Pat Fryermuth had that blow-up game, but I don't think that's going to happen every single week. Look for DK Metcalf. Do we really have a solid bounce-back performance in the way that Aaron Rodgers has been playing over the last couple of weeks? I do trust the Pittsburgh Steelers to stay in this matchup against the Green Bay Packers because the Steelers defense hasn't been playing well either. So this might be, not really going to say a shootout, but it could be a matchup where both teams get into the high 20s. So DK Metcalf is another start of the week. Now let's move on now to the tight end spot. We will stay in that matchup and go to the opposing team there, Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers. Tucker Kraft did have a touchdown last Sunday, had a nice performance, over 15-plus fantasy points. So Tucker Kraft has really been solid in the tight end spot there. Another nice matchup going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the preseason. I probably wouldn't have had this matchup, but the Steelers defense hasn't really been playing too well this season. And theirs is a defense that has allowed 4 tight ends to score 10-plus points this season. So wouldn't doubt at all if Tucker Kraft becomes the 5th tight end to reach that mark. Is looking at the Week 8 projected total points at 11.4. Receiving yards is at 51.6. Receiving touchdowns is at 0.4. So start up Tucker Kraft in Week 8. And we're going to move on to the next tight end, and that's going to be Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. The Bills fresh off of the bye week. So this is going to be a high-powered offense going up against the Carolina Panthers defense that honestly has been really underrated, but still a nice matchup on paper for Dalton Kincaid, as the Panthers defense have allowed 5 tight ends to score at least 9.9 points. I know that stat is crazy, but shout out to Sports Illustrated for that stat. Really nice article that they're putting out for their starts and sits every single week. But Week 8 projected total points, 9.2. Projected receiving yards at 39.8. Projected receiving touchdowns at 0.3. So with Dalton Kincaid, I know he's really had those games, kind of really similar to Cortland Sutton, where he has 7, and then he has 20 the next week. So you really know what you don't really know what you're going to get. With Dalton Kincaid every single week. There's just a lot of mouths to feed with this offense. You got Keon Coleman. You got Khalil Shakir. You got James Cook coming out of the backfield. But I do expect Dalton Kincaid to really have a nice game coming off of the bye week, and the Buffalo Bills looking to continue to really cement themselves as being one of the best teams in the AFC, because right now they would be the number 2 seed behind the Indianapolis Colts, who are the number 1 seed. So that is the starts of the week. Now let's go on to our Week 8 fantasy sits. Like I mentioned at the top, we're going to give you 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 1 wide receiver, and 1 tight end. So let's go ahead and kick things off with Carson Wentz of the Minnesota Vikings. Keep in mind this matchup comes tomorrow night. So if you do have Carson Wentz in your lineup, I would definitely find someone else, because it is a tough matchup going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. And Wentz himself has failed to score 15.3 fantasy points in 3 out of his last 4 starts with the Vikings, especially with J.J. McCarthy being out. You have some talented receivers with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. T.J. Hawkinson has really been a bust this season in fantasy football, especially the way where he was drafted in ADP. You did get the report that Aaron Jones is going to be activated from the injured reserve, but I do expect Jordan Mason to still be the focal point of this running game for the Vikings, but nonetheless, just a tough matchup. I just think that this is going to be a Chargers team looking to get back on track after they really got dominated on Sunday against the Colts. Now let's move on to our running back sit of the week. That's going to be Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Now, the Ramondre Stevenson, we really need to talk about this, because heading into the season, there's a lot of noise about TreVeyon Henderson really taking over this offense, and that has not happened whatsoever. To be honest with you, if you do have TreVeyon Henderson, I would definitely look to another option. Really the way that this offense has been rolling, looks like Ramondre Stevenson has been that bell cow running back. Another tough matchup, though. If you're going up against Cleveland Browns, probably not going to go so well for you. I know the Patriots offense has really been playing well, especially with the way that Drake May has been playing. But the Browns, giving up just 3.5 yards per rush. I feel like you're going to need a touchdown in there to really have a nice day for Ramondre Stevenson. So just based on that, I just don't think it's going to be that good of a performance of Ramondre Stevenson. However, if you don't have any other options, what could you do? But if you do have some more options, I would sit Ramondre Stevenson in a tough matchup against the Browns. Now let's move on to Jalen Waddle, who was featured in our duds of the week of the Miami Dolphins. And no matter if it's Quinn Ewers or if it's Tua starting this week against the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons, as you see there, have allowed 81 receiving yards per game to wide receivers. However, though, I just can't really trust this offense right now. And the Atlanta Falcons really was solid against the San Francisco 49ers. I know you had that blow game with CMC, but really outside of that, Kendrick Bourne didn't really have that big of a game. So I would look elsewhere and sit Jalen Waddle for this week. All right, let's go on to a question before we get into our final sit of the week. Someone tried Bucky Irving, tried to trade me, Bucky Irving and Jacoby Myers for Cam and Scat. Bucky Irvin, who knows when he's going to come back at this point. And Jacoby Myers, I don't really trust him at all. So I would hold on to Cam Scataboo. To be honest with you, I just don't really trust Jacoby Myers in that deal. If you can. So, yeah, I think Jacoby Myers isn't really worth anything at this point. We were just holding on hope that he's going to be the wide receiver one, but that offense is just garbage. So I would just hold on to Cam Scataboo for now because he's in a better offense. I know Bucky Irving, once he come back, he's going to be really good, but who knows, when we're going to get the report that he's coming back, because, we've been, out of the couple of days for the past couple of weeks that they've already reported him out. So that's definitely not a good sign, especially with Tampa being on the bye week. I would just hold on to Cam Scataboo for now. Let's go on to the final sit of the week. That's going to be Zach Ertz of the Washington Commanders. Now, especially with Jane Daniels being ruled out, Marcus Mariota being the quarterback, and paired up with a tough matchup going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, a defense that just allowed one tight end to score more than 10 points. Don't think that Zach Ertz is going to be that lucky tight end to get that second tight end to score more than double-digit points against the Chiefs. So we're looking at all of the projected totals. We'll see what happens. I just think it's going to be a tough game environment where the Commanders are going to be trailing most of this game. So you might see more passing volume just because of that. Might get some garbage time. But outside of that, Zach Ertz, I would rather look at another tight end like Rondé Gadskin or even George Kittle in a bounce-back game. So that is our starts and sits for week number 8. If you have any questions about your starts and sits or trade questions, definitely throw them in the comments and I'll get to it as soon as possible. So that is going to be our week 8 starts and sits. Now let's go on back to week number 7 as we will pop up the score. And unfortunately, we did fall in this one, but got to give credit to my opponent as they did get the 125.5 to 104.14 win. So we both now moved to 4-3. However, since I know that he's going to have the head-to-head, but since we have the most points on the season, we are now still in the 4th place. But looking at the matchup, we definitely sold on the quarterback decision as we decided to go at Jared Goff, who only scored 10 points, and Bo Nix scored 39. And if you do the math, if we started Bo Nix, we would have won. That's just the beauty of fantasy football. But Justin Herbert, like I mentioned, over 400 passing yards and a couple of passing touchdowns, get 27 points. He's going to win that battle every single day of the week. And let's go to our running backs who have definitely been disappointing. Saquon and Alvin Kamara combined for 10 points. Definitely dud running back so far this season. And especially Saquon Barkley coming off that historic season last year. Saquon just really hasn't been that elite running back they're looking for, especially whenever you drafted him in round number 1. Our opponent had Josh Jacobs, who went off for 18. Rico Dowdle in a kind of a split backfield between him and Chuba Hubbard had 10 points. Jamar Chase started off this one pretty hot, 38 points. Jacoby Myers, like I mentioned, there's a goose egg. He was out in that game, so even with an injury, and my opponent was still able to take me down. Brian Thomas did suffer with an injury. We will have to keep that in mind, but the Jaguars will be going on to the bye week. But only 6 points in London. JSN continues to be a stud for us, 26 points in that Monday night win against the Texans. Tight end matchup, pretty even. TJ Hawkinson, one of his best performances of the season so far, 10 points for him. Tyler Warren had a touchdown to get him to 16 points. Marvin Harrison Jr., 7.8 points in another game whenever Kyler Murray wasn't starting. We will see if Kyler will return after Marvin Harrison Jr. and the Cardinals are on the bye week, so we won't see Kyler Murray at the very earliest until week number 9. And we had Cam Scataboo. Cam Scataboo has just been an absolute dog for us, 18 points. Seahawks defense has been one of the best defenses in all of fantasy football, 10 points. Broncos had 4 points, and then the kicker is Boswell at 8. Chase McLaughlin at 5, like I already mentioned. Our biggest miss was not starting Bo Nix. And you could say we could have started Emeka Ibuka over, or even Zach Charbonnet, who had those 2 touchdowns to get to those 19 points. But really, outside of that, I think that Bo Nix was really our only miss of the season that could, bumped us from a loss to a win. But you know what? We're sitting at 4-3. If we can win this next week to get to 5-3, we're going to be pretty happy with us. So looking at the other scores, you had 101 to 87, 123 to 88, 168 to 76. Holy cow, that was a blowout. And the Birds continues to just dominate their opponents as they win 140 to 89. So looking at the updated standings here in this 10-team league as we head into week number 8 of this NFL season, the Birds, obviously, he's going to be making the playoffs. He's at 7-0. Ben's best team is at 6-1. So that sucks for us because we were only 2 games back. Now we're 3 games back as we're just in a cluster with 3, 4, and 3 teams here. So we sit at 4th place here with 58% chance to make the playoffs. Then you have 1, 3, and 4 team. Then you have a couple of 2 and 5 teams. And then Jeff's scary team down there at 1 and 6. Looking at the updated points for, we're right there at 4th place. The Birds now the only team to score more than 1,000 points this season. We're at 861, so not far behind most of the pack here. Points against, though, this is where we're kind of in a hurt. Actually, no, we're kind of one of the best here because you see here, this the most points is 836. So far we've been playing good defense so far. So after we pretty much going back and forth with wins and losses, so our losing streak now is at 1. So let's go ahead now, go to our recent activity to see what players are at it in the waiver wire. If any players from my latest video was added too. So it looks like Dallas Goedert was added. That's definitely a nice pickup. Dallas Goedert has really been consistent over the last couple of weeks. The Bucks was at it, dropped for the Lions. The Bucks have a nice matchup against the New Orleans Saints, so that's definitely one of the top streaming matchups. I dropped Kyrie Fairbairn. You'll see why in just a couple of minutes why I did that. But really outside of that, you saw Dallas Goedert, the Buccaneers defense, and my drop of Kyrie Fairbairn. That was also not really too many moves in this week in the waiver wire, so we will see if we can pick up any players to really help boost our lineup. So looking at our lineup, like I did look at this pretty briefly before we started stream here. We have Jared Goff on the bye. Brian Thomas and JSN is on the bye, which sucks because JSN has been one of our top wide receivers this season. So Jared Goff, that's an easy fix for us. We do have Bo Nix. Like I mentioned, he has a really nice matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Could be a blow-up game for him. So the Seahawks defense, we're going to have to go pick up a defense. It's just a matter of who do we drop. At this point, I think it's a pretty easy fix here, too. We can go for Emeka Ibuka. I wish that we already had a flex wide receiver here, but we are going to have to be looking for another wide receiver, actually, because we don't have any other options on the bench. So that's definitely going to be troublesome. So we're going to have to do that. So we're going to have to drop both. I mean, we're going to have to drop one of these key guys here. I don't really want to get away with Kittle because I definitely see some value there. Because looking at Tyler Warren, let's go ahead and look at when the Colts bye week is to see it. It's not until week 11, but having George Kittle, I just don't want any of my league mates to take him from me. So we might have to drop like Jameson Williams or RJ Harvey or both because we do need to replace a defense with the Seahawks, but I still want the Seahawks defense. So let's go ahead and tackle the defense first. We'll probably drop RJ Harvey at this point. We'll see what wide receivers are available. So let's go ahead and do both of that. All right, let's go to the wide receivers first. Let's see. Hopefully, I know that Tez Johnson is definitely one of the moves for me. Travis Hunter would be an option. Romeo Doubs or Tez Johnson. So Romeo Doubs, has really been looking at his totals here for the past couple of weeks, he had 13 points, 10 points. I think we're going to go with Doubs here. I really like Tez Johnson's matchup, but I'm going to go with Romeo Doubs here. We're going to have to drop somebody, though, and I think we are going to be dropping let's see who we can drop here. We could go let's drop RJ Harvey here. I mean, J.K. Dobbins is going to be the bell cow running back, so I think that RJ Harvey, though, I mean, we need wins now, so maybe we the end of the season we can pick him up. But for now, we will go with Doubs. So we will move Doubs into the lineup, and we will replace unfortunately in with JSN. So we're going to be going with Dobbs and Ibuka as our starting wide receivers. I don't, like I mentioned, I don't want to drop the Seahawks defense. So we're going to have to drop either JMO or Charbonnet. I think we're going to go with JMO here. I think we're really fine and set at wide receiver. So we are going to go with a defense. Let's see what defenses are available to stream here. Maybe looking at the Falcons, I know is the top option. They have the Miami Dolphins, the Buccaneers, also a top option too. The Chiefs are playing the Commanders. Yeah, I think we're going to go with the Dolphins here. I know that the Chiefs are playing against Marcus Mariota, but I'm going to go to the Atlanta Falcons here against the Miami Dolphins. I think that's a pretty solid bet that the Falcons could provide us some double-digit points. So we are going to go with JMO. I know that's going to be kind of controversial, but I think that we're really set here at the wide receiver position. So we're going to go move with the Falcons, go to the Seahawks. There we go. So that's going to be our starting lineup. And we do have a question here, so let's get to it. Yo, would you rather stash Algier or Brashard Smith? Now, I would honestly rather stash Algier at this point. I mean, this is like three running backs in that Kansas City backfield. You have Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, and Brashard Smith. Tyler Algier has shown, like, I could even see it this week, like Bijan Robinson go off. I mean, let's be honest with you. That game's going to be a blowout. Algier could really have some nice, like, a fantasy outing. I could definitely see a lot of rushing attempts, even a touchdown too. So I think the rest of the season, I would rather stash Tyler Algier at this point. All right, let's go back to our lineup here. We will go through the lineup, but let's go through not the waiver wire, just the players and the free agents that are available that I think that could be valuable to you as well. So let's move on to the quarterbacks, and we'll just go position by position, and we will end it with some of my top defensive streaming options this week if you are desperate enough to need a tight end. Not a tight end, a defense. So Jackson Dart is available in our league. So if that's the case in your league, I would do whatever is possible right now to go pick him up. Same with Jordan Love. That's a nice matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Matthew Stafford is on the bye week, but moving forward, Matthew Stafford is also a nice option. Aaron Rodgers, too, against Green Bay, but however, I would like Jordan Love and Jackson Dart. So Love and Dart would be my top ads this week. Moving on to the running backs, you have a lot of guys. Like I mentioned, we just got brought up Tyler Algier. Like I mentioned, it could be a blowout game where we see an Algier touchdown. I think that both running backs could definitely explode. Miami is terrible against the run. And looking at some other running back options, Tyjae Spears, definitely addable. It is a tough matchup, though, against the Indianapolis Colts, so maybe you'll wait for a better matchup. But really, other handcuff options, Kyle Manung guys is a really nice option. You know, Kareem Hunt. Like you mentioned, we have Brashard Smith, who's going to be all the way down there. But really, outside of that, those are my top RB ads this week. Wide receivers, I know we did pick up Romeo Dobbs, but I really like Tez Johnson in this matchup against the New Orleans Saints. Troy Franklin, too, against the Dallas Cowboys. Not only do I think Courtland Sutton could really have a nice game, but Troy Franklin can definitely find the end zone there. Other wide receivers, Xavier Legette is a nice ad, and it is a tough matchup. I know that it says at Tampa, but the Buffalo Bills hasn't really been that great of a defense against the pass. And Kayshon Boutte, I know it's against Cleveland Browns, but definitely go pick him up too if you can. He's really been back-to-back consistent games, both against the Saints. Let's just look at Boutte's stats here really quick because he's really been soaring up because, yeah, you see here against the Saints, 26 points against the Titans. I know he only had 2 catches and only 2 targets, 55 yards and a touchdown. So I think that he does need a touchdown to really save his day. So just be wary of that. Now let's move on to the tight ends. David Njoku, if he plays, definitely an option there. Dalton Cade and Kyle Pitts, Rondé Gaskin. I like all of these top options. And Cade Otton, too, especially with no Mike Evans, also could be in play. And watch out for Colston Loveland, too, could also be a nice addition if Cole Kmet doesn't play. So if Cole Kmet doesn't play, if you need a tight end, Colston Loveland would be a nice addition. But Kincaid, Pitts, Gadskin would be my top options for the week. Now let's close it out with the defenses I would stream this week. The Chiefs, especially with Jaden Daniels being out and Marcus Mariota now being the starting quarterback. Other options, the Buffalo Bills against the Carolina Panthers could be a nice secondary option if you do miss out on a defense like the Chiefs. I did bring up the Atlanta Falcons. They do play the Miami Dolphins, But really, outside of that, you do have some other tough matchups. I mean, the Bears, if Lamar doesn't play, I do not want to touch the Bears at all. And then really outside of this, I mean, maybe the Chargers against Minnesota, but with the Chiefs and the Bills available, I would rather have those two defenses. All right, so this is going to be our starting lineup heading into our Week 8 matchup. We'll have Bo Nix as our starting quarterback, still rocking with our two running backs. Though, we could go with Chase Brown over Alvin Kamara, but I think that at this point we just rock with what we got here. So we're going to have Saquon and Kamara. Two wide receivers is going to be Emike Ibuka and Romeo Doubs. Tight end is going to be Tyler Warren. Flex is going to be Cam Scatterbo. Defense will be the Falcons, and Chase McLaughlin will be our kicker. Okay, before we close things out here, we're going to go into our matchup heading into week number 8 to see who our opponent is, what buys are they on, what key players are they dealing with on the bye week. So we will load this up, and that'll be it for tonight's stream, and we will look ahead to week number 8 of this fantasy football season. So we are 4-3. Our opponent is 2-5. So our opponent desperately needing a win at this point, and we are heavily favored, 123-56. As you can see here, I don't know if they're even checking at this point because Kyler Murray is on the bye, Ashton Jeanty on the bye, Trey McBride's on the bye, Tyreek Hill is on the IR. Now, you could say in the chat this should be an easy win. However, if you go back a couple of weeks ago, we had the same scenario and we lost. So I'm not overlooking even if they don't even check their lineup at this point. But there's really nothing to go over here. Like Kyler Murray, Ashton Jeanty is going to be out. However, they do have Chuba Hubbard and CeeDee Lamb. Trey McBride being out, definitely going to hurt them. Ted McMillan has a nice matchup against the Buffalo Bills. Patriots, I mean, that's going to be one of the top defenses this week going up against the Browns and Tyler Loop. So you got pretty much every advantage outside of wide receiver. We're pretty even on that. And then the kicker, Tyler Loop, has the advantage ever so slightly over Chase McLaughlin. But really looking out of their key injuries, Tyreek Hill and Kyler Murray is on the injured reserve and out. So, I mean, this should be a win. We need to win this one, especially with how decimated this roster is and how many buys that they're dealing with. If we don't win this one, I'm going to be pretty pissed on next week's show. But we are projected to win this one. We'll go through all the other matchups. Looks like the 4-3 versus a 2-5 team. 131-76 is that projected. Doge versus MDR. MDR, the team that we just lost to, is projected to win this one 117-62 against Doge. And then you have 1-6 versus 2-5 between and Jeff Scary Team. A low scoring matchup is projected here, 89-64. And then you have the two best teams in the league. Actually, with Ben's best team, 130-114. So this may be a week where the Birds can really separate himself, or Ben's best team beats them and moves into tie of first place. So definitely a big matchup here. We will definitely look at that, and we will also look at our matchup as well. But that's going to be it for today's show. I definitely appreciate everybody tuning in, dropping your questions, whether that's trade questions or start sit questions. I really appreciate everybody for tuning in to tonight's show and all of our content that's coming out during the rest of the week. So I definitely appreciate everybody for tuning in. Scheduling note, since SEC Talk will be on Wednesday night, this fantasy live stream will shift to Tuesday night. So definitely stay tuned into that. We'll have some more injury updates and news. Hopefully no injury updates, but you never know with the NFL season, the way that's been going. But good luck in your fantasy matchups. Hope you are able to take down your opponent, whether you're starting to build your winning streak or looking to, get out of that losing funk and get one of your first wins of the season. I wish you all the best in all of your fantasy matchups. And keep in mind, your Thursday night matchup is tomorrow night. You'll have the Los Angeles Chargers going against the Minnesota Vikings. You'll have your Sunday night matchup and Monday night matchup, so just keep that in mind. That'll be it for tonight's show. I definitely appreciate everybody for tuning in, and I'll catch you all next time. So long for now.